Mary Ann Shadd Carey, oh, you're going to love her. Another G, Mary Ann Shadd Carey, mind you, this is the generation before Ida Bell Wells. She's got a newspaper. Mary Ann Shadd Carey is like, look, I'm an integrationist. I think black people can live with white people, but I think we need to have all our rights. So that's her position. And meanwhile, you got our man saying, Bibb is like, yeah, I don't think we need to be living with black people, with white people. We need to have our own black towns. Then he starts that newspaper, The Voice of the Fugitive. He said, we are fugitives. Then he starts an organization he heads called the Refugee Society. So they're looking at enslaved people. Like we see now, we see people fighting immigration, deportation. People say, these are immigrants versus black people. No, go study. There was a time when our people looked at enslavement and looked at our condition, and we called ourselves refugees. And so he says, if you can get to Canada, you join us. We in the Refugee Association. Another thing, and my friend Cheryl LaRoche wrote a book about this, actually talking about free societies in the Midwest. Remember, we talked about Kentucky, where Bibb was born. Ohio, if you get to Ohio, you might have a chance. All through the Midwest. Tying back to your AME church roots, thinking about your father, Allen University, Dave Chappelle's grandfather. The AME church, which is established on the East Coast out of Philly, Richard and Sarah Allen, the first bishop of the AME church, Richard Allen. The second bishop of the AME church is out of South Carolina. He's named Morris Brown, the only school in Atlanta University Center named for a black person, Morris Brown. And if you've ever been to Allen or ever been to Metropolitan AME Church, if you look in the stained glass windows of the AME Church and the AME Church schools, they name all those bishops. And you see the names of these institution builders. Morris Brown, the great Paul Quinn College, still in Texas. Richard Allen, Allen University in South Carolina. At any rate, when they start on the East Coast, then Paul Quinn and others move out to the Midwest. They set up these little AME churches. They set up these little AME churches in these little black places. Those places double as stations on the Underground Railroad. So there's this.
I was just talking, you know, we have these debates about the church, you know, the power of the church. And we should have a conversation about that another time. But I can never disrespect the church because as an institution, it had a purpose. And I wish we would get back to it.
That's right.
I wish we would get back to it. They were powerful, powerful building blocks for us. They were. I don't know how they lost their way. I don't know what happened.
Some of it is amnesia. The thing you're curing now, the thing we're talking about now. When you don't remember, you may act differently. And then some of them maintain that independence. The AME Church has been an institution that has been unwavering in some ways, but then they have other issues. But one thing's for sure, as you're saying, we have to study the Black church differently. We can't begin with the music and the mega church and the gospel of prosperity. No, you got to go back, because if it weren't for the AME church, a lot of people wouldn't have escaped an Underground Railroad. Henry Bibb wouldn't have been helped in the same way. You wouldn't have seen that Midwest thrust through Ohio and Michigan. They wouldn't have gotten there. And so you have to go back to that. In fact, the roots of the AME Church, in fact, it's, like I said, it's a conversation for another day, but the Free African Society in Philadelphia, 1787, it is Sarah Allen and Richard Allen and those people congregated around what become the AME Church that helped intervene in the yellow fever epidemic of Philadelphia. In other words, I mean, so we're talking about coronavirus. Go back to the church. And these Black people who are in harm's way, the essential workers of the 18th century, if you will, who are in the way. And Philadelphia says, you know what, if it weren't for these Negroes, we wouldn't have had no city. I mean, it's very important to understand Black institutions. So Bibb is in Canada. It's 1850 now, after 1850. He spends the last 4 years of his life building those independent institutions. And it's very important then to understand. But that's why I mentioned Herb Boyd, because Boyd writes about that debate in Black Detroit. But it's important to understand then that Bibb, arguing with Mary Ann Shadd Carey, also arguing with, but also supporting one of his great friends, and I think this is a brother who we really need to study a lot more, the great Martin Robeson Delaney. Martin Delaney was on the side of building Black institutions. In fact, Frederick Douglass and Martin Delaney were partners on the North Star newspaper. We know the name Frederick Douglass, but what we don't know is that Martin Delaney, in fact, Douglass said this about Delaney. Douglass said, you know, every day I get up and thank God he made me a man. But he says every day Delaney gets up, he thanks God he made him a Black man. That was Delaney was always race first. Delaney went to Africa. He went looking for play. He told the Nigerians, you know what, we can grow cotton over here and corner the cotton market. This is 1859. This is before the Civil War jumps out. So Bibb is part of this argument over what Black people should do. And by the time he draws his last breath in Ontario, Canada, Henry Bibb has become, with Josiah Henson and Marianne Shad Carey and all the people who, if you want to read more about them, you can read, there's a 5-volume set called The Black Abolitionist Papers. It was edited by Peter Ripley. Interestingly enough, Ripley was aided over the years by a sister named Dorothy Porter Wesley, because she knew where all the documents were. But at any rate, if you read the Black Abolitionist Papers, if you read Carter G. Woodson, he edited a book called The Mind of the Negro, as revealed in his letters. He did another big book called Negro Orators and Their Oratory. You can read the speeches of Bibb and Delaney and Shad. You can read the newspaper articles of all these people. And you see, not in 2020, not in the 1970s or 60s, not in the Harlem Renaissance, New Negro of the 1920s, but in the 1840s and 50s, they're debating, should we leave? Should we go to Africa? Should we go to Haiti? His friend Bishop James Theodore Holly says, let's just go to Haiti. We can get to Haiti. And he moves to Haiti. Should we go to Canada? Some of them say, we're going to stay here. But if we're going to stay here, damn it, we're going to be free. That's Frederick Douglass. And so Bibb operates in that field of Black abolitionists, and he's a name that more of us should know. And because you decided that we should talk about him in this piece, I think now more people are going to be like, you know what, I got to go read Henry Bibb's narrative. So I appreciate you bringing him up.